probably wondering what I'm doing with this. It's because today we're talking about fuel. So then the question is, what fuel can you put into this? So if you go to any gas station, you'll see multiple rankings of octane. You want to put the biggest one in, right? You want to put the 95, the 105 in, because it's the fastest, right? Not really. Simply put, the fuel octane rating is just a measure of how much the fuel mixture can be compressed before it self-combusts. To explain that a little further, what you want to happen in a gasoline/petrol engine, i.e. a not diesel engine, you want the spark plug to ignite your fuel. So when you hit the top of that compression stroke, you want the spark plug to set that off. What you don't want to happen is to have the fuel ignite itself due to being compressed too much. So in high performance vehicles, cars are included in this, but let's talk about sport bikes for now. They're going to have a higher compression ratio, somewhere above 10 to 1. So that just means how much the air-fuel mixture is compressed in the engine in simple terms. Higher compression ratios allow an engine to produce more power for its size. So what can happen, and we'll get back to it in a second, is with lower octane fuels, before they're all the way compressed in these high compression engines, they can self-combust, which means just the air-fuel mixture is just right that when it's compressed to a certain point, it will explode by itself. So it depends on what engine you have to how high an octane you need. This particular bike needs a 90 octane. So, contrary to popular belief, fuels are the same density, so I don't gain anything from going from a 90 octane fuel to a 95 on this particular bike. So if you go up to the pump, if you roll up to the pump in your car and it only needs like 87, just put it in, save yourself the dollars, you gain nothing from it. But really what your goal should be is you want to put the lowest octane fuel your bike can handle. And now typically, yes, the sportier your bike, the higher the octane you're going to need. Even just Google fuel for insert your bike name and it will tell you. You don't need to put 95 in every single bike just because that's what bikes take. So using a lower rated octane in an engine with a high compression ratio, such as your sport bike or a lot of high performance vehicles, it can cause a problem known as knock. So what your piston wants to do, it wants to come all the way up to the top of its compression cycle and then have the spark plug ignite the fuel to push it down. But what will happen with knock is as the piston is coming up, because the fuel octane level is low, it's going to self-combust before it's at the top, before the spark plug is what ignites it. So what's going to happen is as your cylinder is coming up, it wants to get all the way to here. This is where it wants to compress the air-fuel mixture to, but it's going to self-combust here if you have a lower octane. So what will happen now is the cylinder still has to finish its cycle, but it's already exploding here. So first of all, you're going to lose power because the cylinder still has to come all the way up, but this explosion is trying to push it back down already. But then more worryingly, if it's exploding here, one, you can overheat a lot of components past the point they were designed to deal with, so say the top of your piston, your cylinders. But then more worryingly again is the pressure that's building up, because already here it's exploding, it wants to expand down, but your piston, just for momentum from the engine or the other cylinders, is going to need to finish its cycle and come all the way to the top. So this already exploding thing is going to put a ton of pressure onto the cylinder. So you can like blow gaskets, you can ruin your cylinders super quickly. So higher octane fuels are harder to produce, so that explains the difference in price at the pump. But why are different gas stations different prices even if they're in the same place? So the conventional thought is that different gas stations are charging you different prices because they're giving you different petrols. But that's not the case. In fact, most of the time, all the petrol stations in your area are going to be giving you the exact same gas because it came in the same shipment or through the same pipeline. There is a slight difference between some of the top guys and the bottom ones, which is the detergent they add to it. The standard for fuel for most countries is already plenty good for your vehicle, but these detergents can be shown to help improve the life of your engine a little bit depending on which study you look at. So really the difference in price you're paying, the 15-cent difference between the guy on one side of the street and on the other, is business costs. It's going to be how much marketing they have to do if they're one of the big companies like your Shell or your Exxon, or if they can't do bulk orders. So like say an on-branded petrol station might have to pay more to get their fuel brought out to them because they can't do these gigantic bulk orders. So another expense for gas stations is credit card charges. So you'll see one price for cash and one price for card. So what some stations might do, they might sell their fuel at a slight loss just to try and encourage you inside to buy snacks or groceries. So we're here on a very cold winter morning to test the myth of can you get more fuel for your bike when it's cold out. Now the theory goes that when it's cold out, because petrol is a liquid, it condenses and the pumps measure in volume. So theoretically, when the petrol is cold, you can get more in your tank for the same money. However, I'm not seeing any storage tanks here, because you know where they are? They're underground. The problem with them being underground is it's the same temperature year round, or at least it's not a very big difference. So you're gonna get the same year round no matter if it's in the middle of summer or in the middle of winter. So it doesn't matter when it is, doesn't matter if it's colder in the mornings, you're gonna get the same amount of petrol through the pump. A lot of pumps are also calibrated for a certain temperature, so you might see on it that it's like calibrated at 20 degrees Celsius, so it will account for the small change in temperature that does exist. So the myth goes that you should fill up in the morning when it's cold rather than filling up when you need to. But the better advice is just to fill up when you need to. So at least here in the US, when you go to a gas station, you'll typically see X amount of ethanol in this fuel. So what that means, obviously, is there's a certain amount of ethanol mixed in with the regular oil-based gasoline. So E10 is 10%, E15 is 15%, E85 is 85%. It's very straightforward. The issue we run into is a lot of modern cars now are being built to deal with the higher ethanol content in fuel. So you might see, you know, nothing more than E20 in this car. It can go up. Motorcycles can't deal with anything past E10 though. Now, that's typically not a problem. Most gas stations here in the US still only have 10%. Ethanol actually came in with really good intentions of reducing the country's need on foreign oil by making 10% of the fuel homegrown from corn. Like it's natural. The issue we run into is what ethanol is. It is an alcohol, so it does absorb water, so you have to be careful of that in your tank. So the issue with ethanol actually comes with two costs. The first being your MPG. Ethanol only has about 2/3 the energy content of gasoline. So what that means is your fuel, it's only about 10% in here, but it means you're down about 3% of your MPG. The second one is a monetary cost, because at the minute it's also bringing food prices up, because there's so much corn needed to produce the ethanol, because there's so much gas being used here in the US, that there's not enough corn left over for food, so the food prices go up.